Meeting to order. Board Member Baker should be coming in. She's caught up in traffic right now and construction. It's that time of the season. Let's all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I go into this, I'm just going to give a little intro on the public input, because we have 7 people tonight to speak on public input, and I'm just going to give you some time to prepare in your mind in case you've never spoken in front of our school board what it will happen. Our board policy is 15 minutes per agenda item. There are 7 people all in the same agenda item, which is the return to learning report, and they're all speaking in opposition. So you can either, with 15 minutes, you can choose if there's some of you that are on the same page and have the same, maybe to waive your time and give it to someone else. You can consolidate that, or I would take a motion if we wanted to extend typically when it's over that, we would do like a 3-minute time frame per person but we could do like 2.5 or something like that if we wanted to look at that. So I just wanted to give them some preparation time to get, if they wanted to get together or text each other and say, hey, I'll speak for us, because I know some of them have the same concerns and might, instead of repeated concerns over and over, that it could be consolidated into, and say I'm speaking on behalf of, you know, XYZ people too, so that we know that. So you can go ahead and do that, and we'll get on to some of the other business things, because that's later on in an agenda, but just wanted to give you that idea, and we can even talk about that motion when Board Member Baker arrives. Let's go on to the business manager issue of oath of office. You have it up there? Did you gave it to me, now I put, oh, it is up there. You want me to come up there and do it? Sorry about that. Mm-hmm.
Cynthia H. Mickelson, at a regular meeting of the school board held on Monday, June 8th, 2020, the school board declared you were a duly elected member of the school board of Sioux Falls School District 49-5. Cynthia Mickelson, section 13.814 of South Dakota law provides that newly elected members of the school board shall qualify and assume their office at the annual meeting of the school board in July by taking and subscribing to an oath or affirmation to support the laws and Constitution of the United States and the state of South Dakota, and to faithfully perform the duties of school board membership. At this time, as business manager of the district, it is my pleasant duty to administer the oath. Would you please raise your right hand and state your name?
I, Cynthia Mickelson, having been elected to the office of member of the school board of Sioux Falls School District 49-5 of Minnehaha County and Lincoln County, South Dakota, do solemnly swear that I will support the laws and Constitution of the United States and of the state of South Dakota, and that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of school board membership.
Thank you. We have the oath for you to sign. A copy will go home with you, and one will be kept in the permanent records. Welcome to the school board.
Thank you. What a time. We will move on to approval of claims to vendors in the amount of $26,065,308.66. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We'll move on to the supplemental consent agenda. There are no items for that, so we will go on to the organization of the school board, and Mr. Veek will assume the chair.
Thank you. I'll now entertain motions for election of the president of the school board.
I'd like to nominate Cynthia Mickelson as president of the Sioux Falls School Board.
Okay.
Second.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll vote on Cynthia Mickelson continuing as president of the school board. Those in favor say aye, opposed nay, and I'll call the roll on this one. Board Member Tolke,
Aye.
Board Member Parker,
Aye.
Board Member Baker,
Aye.
Board Member Ryder,
Aye.
and Board Member Mickelson.
Aye.
It passes 5-0.
We'll move on to the election of the vice president of the school board. I would take a nomination for vice president, please.
I would like to make a motion to nominate Vice President Carly.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for vice president for Carly Ryder. Do I have any other nominations? Seeing none, I'll take roll call vote on vice president. Board Member Tolke.
Aye.
Board Member Parker.
Aye.
Board Member Baker.
Aye.
Board Member Mickelson. Aye. And Board Member Ryder.
Aye.
Congratulations, Carly. We'll now move on to authorization of the pay for school board members. Staying the same this year for the $75 per meeting. Do I have a motion to authorize pay for school board members?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to acknowledging the designation of banks as depositories for funds of the district, which are remaining the same, I believe. As noted, do I have a motion to acknowledge the designation of banks as depositories for funds of the district?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Motion to establish the second and fourth Monday of each month as designated board meeting dates. All those in favor signify by, or excuse me, do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now to designate the Sioux Falls Argus Leader as the official newspaper. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The Argus Leader is the official newspaper. The authorization of membership to the Associated School Boards of South Dakota for the school board. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And then finally, do I have a motion to appoint a delegate and alternate delegate to ASBSD? The current delegation is Cynthia Mickelson as delegate and Carly Ryder as alternate delegate. Todd Tolke serves as an official member as past president of the ASBSD as well. Do I have a motion to appoint a delegate to the ASBD
So
conference?
moved.
Second.
And continuing on, is that your motion? I want to make sure we're continuing at the same. Thank you very much. So we'll continue with Cynthia Mickelson being the delegate and Carly Ryder being the alternate delegate to the ASBSD conference. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Do I have a motion of approval of the minutes of the meetings held June 22nd, 25th, and July 8th?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. The next, we don't have anybody on non-agenda items, do we? That's correct. So I wanted to make sure that's what I had up here. If anybody snuck in here when I wasn't looking and didn't give me a form. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same side. Motion carries. We'll move to the good news report. Thank you, Deanne.
Okay, good evening. A few moments from now, you'll hear a very high-level review of the work being done to safely bring students and staff back to school this fall. While some of the practices and protocols that we've all become used to will have to change in our school environment, so too will the ways in which our community supports our schools, our teachers, and our students. So we wanted to share some information regarding the Sioux Falls Public Schools Education Foundation. They're switching things up this year, trading their traditional Innovation in Education breakfast for a virtual State of the School District event. That event will be live streamed via the Education Foundation's Facebook page, and I'll give you that address in just a second, on Thursday, August 6th from 6 to 7 p.m. At the virtual event, the Education Foundation will celebrate the 49 educators who received Public School Proud Grants this spring. We'll hear from some previous grant winners and also see how they're using their creative materials in their classrooms. And then a highlight, of course, hearing from our new superintendent, Dr. Jane Stabum, with a Q&A session as we get just closer to the school year. As the district's liaison to the foundation, I'm proud of the practical ways that gifts can support both new and veteran teachers through 3 main programs at the foundation. First-time teacher grants, where new teachers receive $200 to equip their classrooms. This is sponsored by the Mary Chilton chapter of Daughters of the American Revolution and Billion Chevrolet. They are sponsoring the first-time teacher grants this year. Our Public School Proud Grants, that is where staff can apply for up to $10,000 per grant to purchase hands-on materials to positively impact student engagement. In June, so just recently, we received $10,000 from the independent insurance agents to support this program. A total of $100,000 was given out for 32 grants involving 49 teachers through the Public School Proud Grants in the spring. And then the Student Success Fund, that is where staff can support students whose families are living in crisis. For example, this spring, the foundation was able to provide personal hygiene items and grocery and gas gift cards to families in need. As previously mentioned, this event used to be held as a breakfast, but since inviting several hundred people into one room for a breakfast is not necessarily recommended right now, the virtual State of the School District event allows us the option to make this an evening event and to invite absolutely anyone who wishes to join through Facebook. So we want to please have everyone who's watching today or listening to consider this their personal invitation to that event. We hope past guests and new supporters of the school district will join us to learn about the incredible educators in our schools and to hear from Dr. Stabum after 1 month on the job. And oh, what a month it'll be. There are many incredible supporters of the foundation, but we especially thank the First National Bank in Sioux Falls, First Premier Bank Card, and SDN Communications for their partnership on this event. These partnerships allow our staff to keep doing what they do the very best, and that is to find new and innovative ways to engage and positively impact students. So we do hope that anyone who is willing to listen and learn about the Sioux Falls Public Schools and the excellence that we have in our classrooms through our teachers and our students, that they will tune in on Thursday, August 6th from 6 to 7 p.m. There are a couple of ways if you would like to participate, and by that, give a small donation of some sort to thank a teacher or something along that line. You can watch live on Facebook at that address, or you can give in advance through Kindful, and that message or that link is on your screen as well. Any questions?
It's such a great organization that helps support our teachers and our students and our schools. And so although a new format, I think it will be a great format, and I encourage the public and anybody here who would like to please participate to help with the grants and so forth that they do for our teachers. So.
Absolutely. So since it's on the go, if you're sitting at a baseball game or out in your yard enjoying the nice weather or whatever you're doing, we encourage people to listen along and learn a bit about the foundation and about the excellent staff we have in our schools.
Deanne, can you remind me how much the foundation has raised typically in this event? I know it's their largest fundraiser.
Right. I believe last year we were close to $25,000 that was pledged at this event. And so it is one of the largest fundraisers that we have. Of course, there's always that concern when you change the format, will the outcomes be similar? And there's just little we can do. And many of the people, retired teachers and past administrators in the district often participate in that breakfast. And certainly we want to make sure that the information is still getting out to our public, but in a manner that is receivable to all at this point in time.
So I'm assuming if people aren't writing down this website, we'll have it up on our website so they can access it anytime and
Absolutely.
give and, yeah, support the foundation because they do great work.
There's a Facebook invite out there also, so if you want to ping that to remind yourself closer to the date, that's a great way to remember as well.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback on the good news report and just welcome to the district. It wasn't on my agenda, so I should have done it in the beginning, but to Dr. Stavum, thank you for everything and that you're here. And oh, it's right over there with the mask. I couldn't see where you were sitting and I couldn't see your name. Thank you for being here and for taking on everything and addressing it. And we as a board are very looking forward to working with you these next several years, we hope. And I know we're facing a lot of challenges here at the district, but we're excited with the leadership that you will provide us. So thank you very much. Okay, on to conflicts of interest. First, we have, I believe, 11 administrator interests, and people who aren't familiar, I'm sorry for this part of the boring business meeting, but every year we ask for any employees and so forth, if they have conflicts of interest, say spouses work within the district or something like that, we make that note in the beginning of the year, especially if an administrator might be overseeing a spouse who's a teacher or other staff member. So that's what we're just noting of record at this point, and they've disclosed those. Do I have a motion to note of record the 11 administrator conflicts of interest?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the notation of the conflicts of interest of 11 administrators signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Next, we also ask board members, and there'll probably be some more board members filling out their paperwork as well, but mine is on here. My husband is currently on the Sanford Health, local health board. So my disclosure is that he doesn't receive payment or contracts or anything for that. It's purely a service board, but I just note that so that that's why I don't vote on any of the Sanford within the district contract, just because of the conflict. So I would accept a motion on noting of my conflict of interest of Sanford Health.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. That motion carries with my abstention. We'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda, items 12A through D.
So moved.
I have a motion second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, items 12A through D, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll now move on to reports of the superintendent in our school improvement plan.
And I'm just looking, everybody, I think, just breathe a sigh of relief, noting that they did not have to sit through the entire consent agenda. So, President Mickelson, if you would consider, I would suggest maybe that we rearrange
That'd be great.
letters A and B so that our guests won't have to sit through school improvement plans unless they so choose to, because those are also part of your world. But otherwise, I would suggest we go on to the Return to Learn plan. Before Dr. Knoll gets started, we appreciate everybody being here, particularly modeling the use of masks, as that's a big part of our plan. And while it was noted that in our board packet tonight, there is an overview of the plan, that is certainly not the extent of it. Our working document is pretty extensive, and so tonight Dr. Knoll will provide an overview, and then as the information continues to be shared with building principals, with SFEA, with our healthcare professionals, this is an ongoing, evolving plan. Our guidance changes almost daily, and we are continuing to want to get additional feedback from our staff and from our community, because this will continue to be shaped potentially right up until when school starts, and even potentially after that point. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Knoll to give us the overview.
And just quick, so that the public knows, so Dr. No will give his presentation, and then we'll ask for the public input after that, so that then that's where you will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Mickelson and board members. I will go through, and as Dr. Staben has stated, the report in and of itself, to be able to go through that this evening of 150 plus pages that continually are added to. I know just within my department today, we added multiple more pages to the overall document. Would probably take us more than just an evening at a board report. So as we go through this, there's a highlight of information that we have. And first of all on there, just as an update on there with our priority statements and staying true to our document and plan with the priority statements. This truly falls under the Sioux Falls School District Priority Statement 3 will provide a nurturing and safe learning experience for all staff. And I show there that obviously the priority areas hit all 4 areas as we go out throughout the school district. But we will go into the information here on the screen now is really just a brief timeline, an overview of what we've been doing through this time period that we started with this COVID-19 pandemic. In April there, we really were working towards the end of the school year and looking at how do we have those safety protocols for the end of the school year, that return of the student computers and books and the creation of the summer planning team, and we navigated that well. I believe our principals did an outstanding job, and our staff in our schools to be able to get that information back in, or the documents back into the school, the Chromebooks, any of those technology devices, and things returned back to, because equally, now it doesn't happen so much in the high school because they don't use lockers, but in the middle school and the elementary they do, to be able to return those items back to the families. So that worked well. We're still working on a few of those things, but really as a whole, that worked very well. In May, we really looked on the timeline there to be able to help and assist the staff that are going to be working with the students during the summer and communicated that information out. And then we created the beginning of our return to learning committees. They were established, and the models of instruction, because we knew going through the spring there to utilize those models of instruction to be able to help formulate those committees to know what things we needed to address before we came into this fall. In June, we did have the board report to initiate that first showing of the models of instruction and the return to learning process. And we really had those 4 areas, instructional core, SEL, and they developed their standards and expectations, which are key and critical. I'll go through that a little bit later. The operations team, which is truly that whole part of the safety and a lot of things that people may never see that are really going to keep our students safe in the schools and our staff safe in the schools. We did start with our first parent survey, and I'll talk about that second one that's going to be coming up here shortly. The communications team began that information out with parents and staff and resources in developing their expense accounting system, because as you had seen today, the budgetary piece on that with the millions of dollars that are requested, and obviously as we go through that, that'll par down as we look at the funding that's available to us and the number of requests that come in. The HR began the messaging with the staff, and that'll continue as we go throughout. And then the calendar committee, we did call the calendar committee together, which 2 of you serve on, and just to be able to discuss through some potential, get their feedback on some potential things that could happen with the calendar, especially with some professional development that we'd be looking at. And we found some other ways to do that to really help our staff, and that'll go through as part of the MOU and an agreement with our staff. And then phase 1 of the return to learning process for activities began there in June. When we kick into July, some of this has happened already. We did meet with our central administration, the group, and Dr. Staben commented on that. With our first day here, we greeted her and welcomed her with a 7-hour meeting to go through many portions of this plan. And then did meet with healthcare providers within our community, represented by Avera, Sanford, Falls Community Health, the City Health, and the Emergency Management, and reviewed the information with them as well, especially the operations portion of that, because a lot of the curriculum piece of that would not have interested them. We did meet with district building administration to review the plan as well. And then there's the 2 board meetings, the one here and then the one that we'll have in 2 weeks from now. We've also set up administrative weekly Q&A sessions so we can go through in that next phase of it, which is really going to start to narrow in on things that we do inside the buildings not necessarily on the larger picture with HVAC and different things that we can set up, but really what we're going to start to do within the buildings and working with our building principals as far as the lunch, the PSTs, back to school sessions. So many of those things, it'll help us now as we begin to have that larger framework to be able to narrow down into things that individual buildings will do, and I'll talk about that coming up. The virtual academy, we do know from the first survey that 94% of our parents said, yes, you will see our child back in the fall. Now, we're going to follow up with that because as more information is known, we want to make sure we get a feel for that again, but 6% had said they had not planned to, or they were worried about that. We need to plan for that 6% because we obviously do not want a 6% budget cut, and a reduction of 6% of our students would inflict some costs that we could not incur. And so we're looking at that part with the virtual so that we can mitigate some of those concerns that some of the individual families have. And with the virtual, I don't want people to confuse that. There's a slide coming up, but it is not the remote learning, and I'll talk more about that coming up. We had phase 2 of the return to activities, and then the creation of an additional safety measures. We're going to be doing that as we go out throughout this entire month, all the way up until the start of the school year. August, our intent is to continue with the communications, continue with the board reports, so to keep the board informed, and as a result of that, to keep our community informed. Staff and parent trainings, and it is for both staff and parents. We need to be able to go through, and what does that look like if we go into the remote learning? That was a difficult piece for a lot of our families as they tried to navigate those waters in some new areas that they'd been in and not seen before. And we're doing some things here in the curricular area to be able to help to make that easier for our families and to make it easier and more common for our staff as well. And then finalize the additional details of the return to learning plan, and then we're hoping to implement that plan. As you can see, when we say even in August to finalize those, that means this is far from done. We have a lot of work still to do as we go throughout the next 6-7 weeks to be prepared for the return of students in the fall. I'll go on to the next part. You've seen this before, so I won't spend time on it, but it was really our graphic to be able to go through and set up those 4 different teams and to make sure that we knew that we had accounted for each of the groups under those teams as we went through to develop the overall plan of the return to learning. Always in the center of that is the public health and the health piece that we need to be able to keep an eye on for our staff, students, and the public as a whole. A new graphic that was created and probably better illustrates than one that we had used a couple weeks ago is how all this comes together. So it's our models of instruction. Really, we look at that very first one that's in the green there in the lower left-hand corner, the traditional learning. That's where our students will be back into the classrooms and attending classes. Our teachers are back in the classroom, teaching in those classrooms. And really, that's an in-person with modifications made in a lot of different areas. And I'll touch on some of those as we go throughout the presentation here tonight. That could move into the modified on-campus learning. There's a couple different versions in that, whether we have half the students back or we have 1/4 of the students back into our buildings. And so that portion of it is really reduction in number in our buildings beyond what we're going to do for the traditional learning. We're going to try to work with some of those numbers with the building principals as well, especially when we're looking at lunch times and before school, after school, to be able to lessen some of the number of students who would be congregated or in specific areas within schools. And then it goes to that third area, which is the burnt orange way over to the right, the remote learning. That's what we were familiar with when we finished this last school year. But our intentions, obviously, with a lot of that curricular piece that has gone on and the work that they have done in that with Dr. Boyson, is to enhance that. Because we had a lot of work to do on that area. It was something that was new to us, new to the whole state, new to the nation, that we kicked into remote learning due to the situations that confronted us. I thought staff did incredible with what they had as resources, and administrators did an incredible job with what they had, parents especially. Just the work they needed to do and involved with their child's education at that point in time. But we have a lot of things that will come up that we'll go through and hit on that as well tonight. On the bottom of that is the Virtual Learning Academy, and we'll talk more about that coming up. But that is a whole separate component that we're making available as well. The next portion on this, the instructional core, so I'll hit some highlights on each one of it, and these are only highlights. If we were, like I said, go through the whole document, instructional core in itself is 70, 80 pages in and of itself, so these are just some portions that they utilized. First of all, with the instructional core, they're really working on there to set up a plan that will allow buildings to move fluidly, and a lot of times we were calling it to pivot between any of those models without a loss of learning. So if we needed to start out, if we were in the traditional and something were to occur and we need to switch quickly into the remote learning, we could do that, and staff and parents would know what that meant. And we would have that set up so that we would not take days or a week to be able to revert into that remote learning. And the same way when we revert back, whether that would be in a modified status or if it'd be back into the traditional setting. This could be on a school-by-school basis, it could be an entire school district, or it could be classrooms, depending on what the situation is. The next portion of that is really that instruction. It needs to be consistent across the district. We heard that from parents. We heard that from students because we had groups of students we met with. We talked with parents. We talked with teachers as well, groups of teachers. And really to make that consistent across, students expressed some of those concerns they had, and I think we can better develop that so there's a common expectation across every classroom. Each level will have a consistent learning management system to deliver that instruction. And I'll hit on that a little bit more when we come up, but it's really at the high school that they'll have the same consistent learning management system at the middle school and then at the elementary as well. The fourth one on there, evidence of engagement will be monitored, documented, and communicated to families. So we knew that we had 1% of our students that were not engaged, and we need to really go through and figure out how are we going to help those students become back engaged when they're not engaged, and how do we monitor that progress as we go throughout the remote learning specifically. The fifth one on there is create cohesion between all stakeholders, including but not limited to our general education, special education, and specialists, because we really needed to include all those groups. And that became difficult as we went through each one of those to be able to hold those meetings, whether it be 504 meetings or special education meetings, and we're working through a lot of that at this point in time. But just that consistency and cohesion between the teachers that may have a case management group and the teachers that would work as a traditional classroom teacher to have that communication. And then, of course, working with our families. We need to make sure that they're well informed of what that is when we go into remote learning and what they're going to see and what their expectations are when we go into that type of a process. The second piece of this for the instructional core is really looking at professional development. And the professional development needs to be provided for the teachers, the EAs, and the substitute teachers so that they know what those platforms are that we're using and they know what those expectations are. So we've built that in, and part of that will be able to be done virtually and go through that training. We're also working on that with our parents as well so that we can give them education as to what they will see when we go into the remote learning. The digital platforms that we'll utilize, the early childhood and elementary will use Seesaw, middle school will use Schoology, and high school will use the Google Classroom. And many of those were utilized this past year, especially in the middle and high school, but not everyone, and we need to make that consistent across all teachers and all grade levels there. We also are going through to purchase the Remind communication tool. We had a lot of feedback on what we were utilizing, and it was really a one-way communication tool, and we need that to be able to go both ways, and the Remind will be able to use that. It's not the standard version or the free version, so there's a cost for those things, but it is a better version that we can utilize to be able to have that communication back and forth with families. And that will help us immensely in trying to have that engagement factor. We also will have effective delivery of online classes. I'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. And then just some of that training in the use of the Google tools and the Google Meet, so we have those common expectations in that as well. And depending on the students we talked to or the parents, they felt it was incredible. To some, could we do it in different ways, or some standards set across the board. And then Screencastify is another one where we do the video and the use of the video to be able to tape those and be able to serve that out to our students through the Google tools and Google Meet. So those are some of the things that we're utilizing through the instructional core. Next part is the Sioux Falls School District Virtual Academy. As I stated, 94%, yes, our students will be back in the fall. I'm sure many are very pleased to hear that their students going to be coming back in the fall, and that is our intention at this point in time. Obviously, we'll have to see what happens between now and the start of the school year. But our virtual academy is being set up at this time, and to be able to really benefit those individual students that whatever the reason is, that their plan is not to return right away back into the fall. And so whether that is 6% that indicated before, or if it's a larger number or a much smaller number, some have seen that in other countries where it started out to be a very large number to start with, and then was reduced quickly when it actually came to that time to enroll in the virtual or back into the face-to-face education. A lot of that's dictated by what's going on in our community at that time. Well, we're going to be prepared in that to be able to have that virtual academy as an option. That's something where it is an online platform, which is not to be mistaken with the remote learning. The remote learning, if we're in a traditional setting and we need to go into the remote learning for whatever reason, whether that's a classroom or a school, our teachers will still direct that, so their classroom teacher will still direct that remote learning then. In the virtual academy, we'll have individuals, teachers that are there to help and assist, but it's truly a parent needs to be involved, especially in that elementary level, if they're choosing to opt for that virtual academy. In the middle school and high school, they can be obviously more independent there, and our high schools have seen this by far the most because they've utilized the virtual platform at our Joe Foss programs. At our high schools, each one of them have the learning centers that they've utilized the virtual. So we never want to mistake that this is a great opportunity for some of those to be able to utilize if they feel that the needs are going to be better met in that fashion instead of being in a face-to-face situation. Again, as I stated, this is not the remote learning. It's entirely different. And a key piece of this as we communicate this out to our community is that we really need that parent and adult participation. That's going to be essential, especially the younger the student. That becomes a necessity for them to be directly involved on a daily basis with their child. I've talked with many on that in the last few days, and they're very relieved to hear that because of different circumstances their family may be involved with. And the fifth piece on there, information will be available later this month. Our intent is to have that out here in the next couple weeks and be able to have individuals that are intending to take or select that option to be able to do so before the 1st of August. So we know those numbers and we can start to prepare for those numbers. We will go in next into operations. Operations is the area that a lot of the sharing with our medical community and our administrative groups, several different groups that we've gone through and reviewed this with, that's where the bulk of the time is spent. And so the multitude of pages is probably with our curricular piece as they plan that out, but the operations part gives us some of the detail of some of the changes we're going to make in our buildings. So first of all, I'll start in there with the health services. Molly Satter oversaw the health services component of this as we met as an operations team. And it's really, they're gonna assist in determining the health and safety practices required for all operations. They did that for the summer, and those were communicated out to all the teachers and the families that were involved. And that'll be the same situation as we go through with this school year, and that'll come from the health services component. We will also be establishing the protocols for an isolation space for students and staff demonstrating COVID-19 symptoms. We don't know whether an individual will have that or not, but we need to provide that isolation area where they'll be secluded, and we'll be able to help them and assist them so we can take those safety precautions. In the same manner, we'll determine spaces for routine health care away from that isolation space. And Molly Satter will work with the school nurse and the school building principal to identify those areas. In each one of those schools, they're going to walk through that area to identify and see what practices and protocols they'll utilize to make sure those things are in separate areas to keep it isolated. Molly will also oversee, or the health services will also oversee the health screening practices for staff and students, and you'll see a copy of the student one coming up. We're incorporating part of that staff one into that as well, but we need to be able to answer those questions each of the days and follow that guideline to make sure that we have individuals that are that are healthy, that are not experiencing any of those symptoms that would be related to the COVID-19. And the development of the PPE guidance, I'll show you a portion of that, not the whole page. We could be happy to share the whole page, but the top portion of that truly outlines who needs the PPE guidance and who we're going to purchase that PPE equipment for, so that they can utilize that within their workplace. There's also going to be the safety protocols that is going to be messaged out to all the staff. So we'll continually to update that and send that information out. Sometimes it becomes a little bit numbing with the emails that come out and the information that comes out, but that's something we definitely need to keep in front of people. And it changes. It changes from week to week, sometimes day to day, as to what that information is that we need to communicate out. On that PPE guidance, this is the top portion of that one-page document that summarizes it for our staff. And as we look through there with our staff and the PPE, all things are going to be going through and highlighted as to whether it's encouraged or required. All staff, other than what is outlined below, are encouraged to wear their cloth face coverings. And this is a portion that we talked through with our building principals, that to be able to set that example, that it is what our expectation is, that we will utilize the cloth face coverings in our classrooms when we're going through the buildings, when central administration comes into the buildings. And if we can set that tone and encourage all to do that, our belief is it will help to keep our students and staff in our buildings. And to be able to go through and encourage that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that coming up as well in the survey that we'll send out. All staff for routine cleaning of frequently used surfaces, they're going to be required. Those that are public facing, if they don't have a plexiglass, it's going to be required. And as you go through this, staff that go into the homes, those that are working with that hands-on less than 6 feet with a student continuously for 15 minutes, a lot of that we're going to see in our birth to 3. There's a lot of requirements they're going to have to wear the PPE equipment, and we will provide that equipment for them, our custodial staff. So that has been laid out as we go through and prepare staff for the fall. So they'll know who is required to wear the PPE and when the situations are that they would utilize that. And that would be provided for each of our staff. Matter of fact, we've gone well above and beyond that, and I'll talk about that coming up a little bit later. This is the questionnaire that we utilize, and part of the guidance that came out on that is that the practice that the parents are to each day go through with their child to answer these questions, to make sure these screening questions that they could answer those to identify whether they should be in a school setting on that day. And if not, then obviously they cannot come into the school setting. If they answer that they could, then they are allowed to be into the school setting. There's a similar one that'll be utilized for staff that we'll have out, obviously, for the staff. And we're going through that process of where we'll have that signed off on by all staff so they know the expectation of the questionnaire that they're being asked. Currently, we posted around. We did have it at one time where you had to sign in on a Google Doc to approve that part. And we need to figure out what's the best practice for that to make it easier for our staff this fall so they can do that, but still have it in front of them every single day. Operations, child nutrition services, a lot of work done in here with first of all, the touchless point of sale. So we'll have individuals that will be serving. It won't be the smorgasbord per se, and I know that'll dishearten a few of our high school students as they're used to going through and picking out and selecting what they want on there. But we really need to have that be served by the child nutrition staff, who will be utilizing their plastic gloves, face coverings, aprons, hair restraints. They will utilize that equipment and have that on and worn as they go through and serve that food to the students. So it won't be the ability for them to be able to self-serve, but the touchless point of sale, really you look at the high schools are probably the most accustomed to that because they utilize the IDs as they go through. The middle school a little less so we put into the budgetary process to be able to figure that out and make sure that we can get some type of an ID with the barcode with each of the students so that they can use touchless as well. Part of that will be purchasing the equipment to do the scanning. And then in the elementary, it'll be in a pouch system where they'll bring that down and deliver that to one person and they scan each one of them instead of a student scanning their own. And so that'll be in the pouch piece of that. When you look at the no self-serve unless individually wrapped items, there will be some individually wrapped items that we'll utilize. We're also going to use the individually or pre-wrapped utensils that'll be used at all the sites so that that's not just in a container that everybody grabs their own, trying to minimize that contact point. The next piece of that is individually prepackaged condiments instead of the one tub of ketchup or other things that would be utilized, but we'll prepackage those. Also, when and where possible, reduce the number of students eating in one location. And those are some of the things that we're going to continue to work through in that weekly Q&A that we have with building principals of how can we minimize those things, whether that be before school, after school, during the school day, in each of the areas that we have. And a big part of that comes in with the lunch area. And so we'll work on those things over the next few weeks and hopefully deliver some of that information back out and make sure it's communicated, whether that's communicated through the principals to staff and students and families, or we do that at a central location. Another portion of that is food served after a minimum of 3 consecutive days of school closure. This last year you saw that we served food to multiple sites. We had 16 buses that were running. We had multiple sites where we served food out of the grab and go. And if we do go into a situation where we have a closure, we're going to really look at that third day. So if we're going 3 days on a situation, then we're going to kick in with that food service. We'll use the busing to be able to get the food out, or we'll have food sites where they can do the grab and go. We're also going to do that if it ends up being just an individual building. We'll look at a building by building situation and may provide that grab and go at an individual building, even though they may not have been one of the original sites that were selected this last spring. So we utilize both those things with the operations of child nutrition. And again, there's many more that they're doing. These are some highlights of that. When we look into the facility and maintenance, first part of that obviously goes into that full deep summer cleaning. And we're having that completed at this time as they're going through and doing that. A part that people may not know, although if you're in any one of the buildings, and many of the teachers can attest to this, you know exactly when the air shuts off. You can feel it, you can hear it. And here, I can tell you right at 5:30. But that'll run at a longer time earlier in the day. That'll start running to be able to circulate that air through, and then it'll also go further into the evening, and especially when we have the student and staff scheduled activities, we'll continue to run that to be able to circulate that through, because that's part of the recommendations that come through. With that as well, we're going to increase the minimum outside air settings by 100%. Instead of that 10 to 20, it'll be 20 to the 40%. That obviously is going to take cooling or heating depending on the season we have, because when we pull that outside air in, it's not going to be at the regulated temperature that we want. So we'll have to cool that if it's hot out. We'll have to heat that if it's obviously cold out. And so that's part of the cost to continue to go into some of these things when we get to that final cost that we have. But that's an important piece of it that's recommended, is that outside air setting. Another portion of that is the air filters. We will increase those to the MERV 14 starting out here in August, and that's a high efficient filter, a higher efficiency filter. And I'll tell you about one other piece that we're going to do that may allow us to have that MERV 14 go back to one of the standard numbers that we utilize, but we'll talk about that coming up. Drinking fountains. There's currently 21 facilities as we go out that have the touchless bottle fillers. That leaves 17 without, and part of the plan is to also be able to go through and equip those buildings that do not have. Now, some of this takes time, because you can imagine so many of the schools across the state and nation are coming up with so many of the same things. So we've been working on several of these things, trying to get stuff ordered and in, and some things get on back order. So we're working on those, but to be able to fill those so that students can use their own bottles within each of the school and not use the fountain per se. But there's 17 without, and we're working on getting those installed. The sneeze guards, anywhere where we're doing the point of contact with community that may be coming in. So you look at the receptionists, that's an area where we definitely would need that sneeze guard. The middle school and high school lunchroom cashiers, part of that is just the continual students that are coming by and through there, and the staff person that would be seated there. Why not elementary? Because elementary will utilize the pouch system, so it doesn't need or require somebody to sit right there next to the student when they're going through the pouch system. And so to be able to put that in there on those main reception counters, some of our high schools already have the glass shield with that first person that comes in. Obviously, we don't need to put it there, but it may be another location where there's the reception area. Hand sanitization dispensers for community areas, lunchrooms, multi-purpose rooms, those will be established in there. And you somewhat think of it wherever we have the card reader that comes in, we're looking at equipping there for those stations to be able to utilize. And then the last one on this list of the highlights for the facilities and maintenance is to install the electric air devices, GPS. Now, it's not Global Positioning System. It's just the name of the company, but it really goes through and will kill 99 or a high percentage of viruses, bacteria within the school through a filtration system every 30 minutes, going through the system when the air is running. And so we're looking at installing those. There's obviously a price tag on that, but we believe over a 10, 12-year period, the life cycle of that, it may reduce illnesses within our buildings significantly, even outside of this time period with the COVID-19. So we're looking at the installation of that. In the meantime, because there's several other areas that are looking to install things like that, so there's some issues on getting things installed and ordering. We'll utilize that higher efficiency filter. Next area, technology, connectivity. We're going to go through in all high school, middle schools to ensure students will use the same device each day. That didn't happen. It did more so in the high school where they had the individual devices. The middle school will utilize that now as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We're also going to have ITS work with local partners to bridge that connectivity gap for students. There's been a lot of work done on that. That's a difficult one. And they'll continue to proceed forward on that effort to be able to get that so that our students, especially when we go into that remote learning, will have connectivity in their homes. The one-to-one iPad, that's going to be the kindergarten and first grade. Currently, we do have iPads in those rooms. It's just not one-to-one. We utilize those as supports and within the classroom, especially if they're doing rotations where they'll be meeting with teachers or small group working with teachers. Others are doing supplemental on the iPads. And so to minimize that contact and sharing, plus to significantly benefit us when we go into that remote process, we will utilize the one-to-one with the kindergarten and first grade. So it's just going to be increasing that number, not needing to purchase that for all K and 1, just to increase that number from what we currently have. The next part of that is a one-to-one with the second and fifth grade. We'll utilize the Chromebooks there, and so it'll be deployed, or by that we mean it'll be assigned to each student as to which one they have, so we won't have to worry about when we get to a remote situation. 6th to 8th grade will now take their Chromebooks home, and they're allowed to do that on the daily basis now, or before they left those into the school. And then very little will be seen different on the high school situation with that, with the Chromebooks that would be able to continue to take those home on a daily basis. We're also going to work on a system now. We've had that in the high schools, but that system's outdated, especially when we're looking to a much larger number across our district. That check-in and check-out process for the devices. In the high school is quite simple. You scan them, scan it, and it's checked in, or you scan their ID and scan the other, and it's checked out. And we need to make sure that that's available going throughout, so it makes it much easier for each of the levels to be able to control that inventory. Operations, this is still in operations, but it's just general building practices that we're going to utilize in our buildings. We need to go through and do a lot of training, work with the principals, make sure we're getting messages out, but minimal mixing between groups as much as possible, and groups of students when we're talking about that. So as much as we possibly can, we want to minimize that. We also want to go through and follow the district requirements of any restrictions on non-essential visitors. So who's coming into our buildings? We finished the year, or went to a portion of the year right before we went to remote learning, where we'd minimize the number of individuals that could come into our building, and that was a good process to use before we went into that remote learning, just to minimize who needs to be in there. And so we'll look at those things. We have some upcoming meetings with some of our community partners, and we value their partnership. Let there be no question about that. But there's some of those things that we need to just wait on until we get into the school year, and we're really going to look at that through that first quarter and analyze it after that. Turning desks to face the same direction. A lot of the elementaries I go into, high schools, middle schools as well, but I love that in the elementary. You go and you sit and just watching the students work or talking with them, they're always faced in groups and working together. But obviously in some of those, some of that information that's been shared out, turning those desks to face the same direction will help to minimize, and then to really cut down on the sharing of materials that students be using. We also, and part of that is the initiative with the tech plan to avoid sharing the electronic devices, toys, books, other games, and learning aids. We need to also promote that healthy hygiene, and some of our youngest kids are better at this than the adults a lot of times. Probably, identifying myself in that more than anyone, but, utilizing their elbow or covering their coughs in ways that do not, spread that across rooms or whatever it may be. So that healthy hygiene, washing hands, all those practices we need to incorporate in. Face coverings. We're highly recommending that, encouraged for all staff. Some staff, I do know will be wearing the PPE or the personal protective equipment because of the nature of their work. Now, part of that you'll notice on there as well that we are purchasing face shields for every single teacher, so that each teacher does have that. Many individuals wish to wear their own face mask, which is fine. Fully understand that. We're still going to have those available. We purchase them in a large enough quantity that we could cover those individuals that need those that don't have them. Because we want to make sure every staff member, especially the teachers working with, now some others will have the PPE equipment already with the shields, depending on their job, but every teacher will have that face shield and access to the mask if they don't have one themselves. And our encouragement, even meeting with the building principals, our encouragement is they're going to set the standard for that and the expectation for that. And we need to encourage when we have the staff meetings that if we can go in and model that in the classrooms and we can put that expectation for each other, it's going to help immensely in keeping our staff and students within our buildings. So we have gone ahead to purchase those for each one of our staff. Hope and desire is obviously everything is in well before the school year starts, but we're working on those things. The students, strongly encouraged again to use our cloth face coverings. We are also, for the students, we've purchased enough so that any of those that wish to or do not have one, we will be able to provide that for them as well. So the thousands that we have purchased in that will cover our students and our staff to make sure that they each will have that available to them. One other part on that, we're going to be conducting a survey that we've been working on, and to be able to send that out and gain staff and parent input. One of the topics on that survey is the masks. And so really to get a feel from our community, much like we did earlier about the return, how many plan to come back into the fall, what's your intentions? We're going to do that same thing with the masks and the face coverings to be able to see from our staff and then from our parents what their request or their feeling is on that. And then we'll take that information, much like we've taken other pieces of information, utilize that to make the best decisions we can. The next portion on this, transportation. Staff on the buses will be required to wear the cloth face coverings, and that's true of the SBI staff or school district staff on the buses. We will have the hand sanitizer on the bus for staff and students to be able to utilize as they go onto the bus. We're also providing the disinfecting wipes on the bus for our SBI staff to wipe railings if time after each route, and I'd love to be able to say in between each route there's going to be time, and I believe we'll try to incorporate that in there, but as much as we possibly can to be able to clean those things down, but some of those routes turn around fairly quickly. We've also incorporated in there with the toys on the buses for the early childhood or the RISE students that they need to be cleaned and disinfected before they're utilized by another student or the next route. We're going to go to the no signatures required for our special education students that normally there'd have to be an adult signature for that's been pre-approved to verify that drop off. Instead, they're going to do that through ID that they'll show the bus driver, but that way we're making that touchless. And the last portion of that, we'll have the assigned seating on the bus when we're able. If we can keep some of those individuals in the same, that'll help us immensely in case something were to happen with a contact. So that's a lot of the information. One of the things, and I think I went over it quickly there and maybe too quickly, each of the classrooms will also have wipes that we're ordering by the thousands. But probably more importantly, because we've heard a little bit of a mixed review on some on that, so we also have the spray bottles that'll be available in each classroom that we've ordered. And obviously, again, our intent to have those in prior to the start of the school year is going to be critical, but we were told to be in this week, but we've heard that before. So we're going to work with that to be able to get those in, but there'll be the spray bottles with the mixture in them for staff to be able to utilize on desks or other objects. But there's also be the wipes that we've finally purchased as well, and they're supposed to be in this week. I think we're starting with 80-some thousand wipes that we'll utilize, and we have orders spread out throughout the year to be able to have those within our buildings. The next part of it is our stakeholders communication. And with the stakeholders, Deanne Conrad oversees this area. And really looking at the communication, I've highlighted 3. Each one of these is very important as we go through, many of which you're going to be a little bit familiar with already and are self-explanatory, such as posters. But really the parent handbook, Deanne and her staff is working on a parent handbook that we can give to parents and students so they can see some of those different expectations and things that will be happening. And so that parent handbook is really to help explain to parents how we're turning back in this year and some of those expectations. There'll be a staff one as well that'll be utilized in much the same manner so that they can reference that handbook, besides the information that'll be going out to staff in multiple different forms of communication.
Dr. Knoll, just
Yes.
a point of clarification, that's a handbook specific to the COVID planning.
Yes.
Not the regular handbooks.
Correct. And there's still the regular handbooks, and we all love those and each read them. But this will be specific to the COVID. Very good point. The Remind as well, we'll utilize that. I talked about that a little bit earlier, and that does a nice feature of that with the translation tool that we'll utilize, the Remind that our teachers can use. And then the website, we do have a website, a COVID-19 resource page and that ability to translate that as well. So that's some highlights from the communications. Obviously, even communications that came out today and will continue to come out throughout the upcoming weeks as we draw nearer and nearer to the start of the school year. As we move through, I did not give near enough credit to these two, and we may pay a price on that later, but resources. Human resources is working currently at this time, but there's a lot of information in there that just hasn't been developed yet or finalized, so we need to give them time to be able to do that, and that information be shared out then after that has been completed. Human resources really working to establish those MOUs, working towards the maintenance, obviously, of our workforce and substitutes. One thing I'll say on the substitutes, we have worked very hard, and Dr. Boyce and her group worked hard to make sure that this next year we minimize pulling any substitutes, our teachers out of the buildings for curricular studies, so we can really save the substitutes for things that are needed. So they've cut back on the curriculum study pullouts, and we'll do that outside of that academic school time. And same way we talked with the building principals, encouraged them not to pull teachers out of those classrooms if all possible, so that we minimize that necessity of a substitute being in there, and we can truly use the subs in those locations that are needed. The financial resources, we're working through the grants, the relief funds, and FEMA. There's some of that that's been allocated and some that we need to apply for as we're going through the process of being able to pay for these. Obviously, as you had seen reported there with the $7.8 million of requested, a lot of that are dollars that have been put into the spreadsheet that we're utilizing. And now we're going through to prioritize that spreadsheet and make sure that we're purchasing the things that are going to bring us back in the safest possible mode that we can. And so those dollars will be utilized in that fashion and be presented out as we go through. And just to reiterate again, it is not a set plan. The plan is going to be a living document that we're going to go through and utilize. And I draw back to just that timeline again. I won't talk through it again, but I go back to that timeline of the things that we're going to be looking at with July, especially the communication with our building principals to establish those protocols within the buildings themselves, and support that with many of the things that you saw throughout this document. And so there's a lot of conversations still to take place and a lot of plans still to put in place, and a lot of people that are working a significant number of hours to make sure that that happens for our students, staff, and community. In summary, the Return to Learning report contains over 100 pages, actually I think it's up to 150 now plus, of planning to prepare for education for our students this fall. A key piece of that is the education and safety. That's our primary objective as we're going through. We want to make sure we're trying to provide the best possible education and maintain that safety for our students and staff and community. Communication is going to be critical as we go throughout this, and to make sure that we're informing individuals as we go along, and keep that information out there so that people become aware of what the plans are, and especially the building principals. A lot of that can come through the building principals because it'll look a little bit different at each one of those buildings depending on how the building is set up. And then sharing that additional information as we build those plans and move closer and closer to the start of that school year. So the administrative recommendation, acknowledge the board update on the district return to learning planning process for the 2021 school year. And I will stand by for questions.
Turn my mic off. There we go. We'll do public input first, and then we'll come back to that. And we had this 7 public input sign up, and all 7. I'm assuming you still want to speak, so I just want to make sure before we decide on a time frame. As I stated before, it's 15 minutes typically. I'd entertain a motion if we want to go like 2:30 on each and go a little bit higher, so it'd be like 18 minutes to allow for everyone to speak if all 7 would like to. Okay, I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to extend the time so that every speaker can have up to 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Carly, will you time? Will you give like a 30-second like hands up maybe or something, so then they have a little heads up knowing that you'll be at about 30 seconds from being complete.
Cards.
Yeah.
Carly has,
No cards.
Left my binder at home.
Maybe
I thought we were past
Can
the
you do your
meeting
hand
of
or
the-
something?
yes.
Okay. Okay, so first up, and when you come up and speak, public input is just speaking to the board and stating things. Our rules are we ask nobody to use anybody's name and criticize any individuals who work for the district. So you can criticize our policies and so forth, but no individuals, and that there should, if we could refrain from reactions and so forth so we can keep moving within our board meeting, that'd be great too. First, and when you come up, please state your name and your address into the mic. And first up would be Grace Gill.
And Carly does have. Yes, green will mean you have 1 minute left, and red will mean you have 30 seconds left. And then my phone will ding, ding, ding when the time is up.
I've got a timer.
Oh, good. So you can
Let me just get
time
it set
yourself. She's a debate.
I am, yes. While I'm getting my stuff set up, I just want to say welcome to Dr. Stavum. We appreciate that you're here, and congratulations, Cynthia and Carly, on your elections and stuff. I'm ready.
Okay. Yeah, and just state your name and your address, please, first.
Does the time start then, or what's the time?
After you say your name and address.
I've never done this before, so I'm a little nervous. I'm really sorry. Grace Gill, 600 block of West 65th Street, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 57106. All right. First off, thank you all for your time and attention in this matter. I appreciate the efforts and the work that this board does. Truly, thank you. I'm going to skip past that and just tell you that as a teacher, I know that students are constantly learning. They see the examples that we set for them, and they live by them. I was reminded of this the other day when I ran into a student getting takeout at a local restaurant. We were both masked up, and on their way out of the restaurant, they reminded me, don't forget to tip well. A reference to the debate team tradition to tip our waiters and waitresses. It was that reminder that we don't teach just the curriculum. We also teach values. That small reminder is what compelled me to be here today. The CDC, the Surgeon General, and the majority of infectious disease experts concur that masks stop the spread of COVID-19 if individuals, especially those who are asymptomatic, wear them. I am here to respectfully urge each and every one of you to set an example and to implement a life-saving mask requiring policy. A mandatory mask policy would teach our students that the golden rule isn't something we just teach, it's something that we do. A mandatory mask policy would teach our students the importance of community and the strength that we can gain when we unify together. A mask policy would teach our students the value of the scientific process, even when it leads us to slightly inconvenience ourselves. I know several people who have suffered long-term consequences of COVID-19. I have known people who have lost their life. I think that the traditional phrase that doctors use when they lose a patient is, "We did everything we could." But that phrase is not exclusive to doctors. I have found myself asking that same question when I've watched 2 of my students be buried in the last 5 years as an educator. In those moments, I have asked myself, did I do all I could? Tonight, you have to ask yourselves, do masks decrease the risk of spreading COVID-19? And if your answer is yes, you must mandate masks. I wonder if as a district, we are ready and prepared to bury our own, our teachers, a custodian, and a counselor. Are we going to be able to stand with their families and say, we did all that we could? Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Grace. Next, we have delayed reaction. Miranda Miller, would you please come up and state your name and address, please? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Miranda Miller, 950 West Venture Place. I teach English at Patrick Henry, and I'm a proud alumni of the Sioux Falls School District. In fact, I loved my experience as a student so much, I decided to come back and start my career as a teacher. And in my first few weeks of teaching, I was told by the district leaders that here, teachers are the district's greatest resource, here, teachers are appreciated, and that here, teachers are valued. I believed that message, I don't now. The Return to Learn proposal being discussed tonight is a chance for the district to put their money where their mouth is. And when I read the plan last night, I was devastated. I put my faith and trust in a district that didn't even have the decency to send out the back to school plan to the staff first. That lack of communication shows a direct lack of appreciation for staff. And moreover, the substance of this plan shows that student and staff health and safety are not valued. I will not stand to be undervalued or unappreciated. This current proposed plan allows for full-sized in-person classes, activities, and events. Students are not placed 6 feet apart in the classroom. There is no plan to minimize hallway passings, no plan to minimize random mixings of students, and no plans to keep students from grouping in the cafeteria. There is not even a basic but life-saving requirement for everyone to wear masks. Adopting this plan without major revisions tells the world that the district is willing to put our health and safety of our lives and our students in high risk. Actions speak louder than words. And if you adopt this plan without substantial changes, you as district leaders are telling us that teachers and students are disposable. And I really hope you don't believe that. You as the board have the power to prove. If each individual has value, you are responsible for protecting everyone who steps into our building. And by requiring masks, that protection is in place. But without it, you're showing the lack of protection for absolutely everyone, and that somehow empathy has an expiration date. If people are our greatest resource, every single one of you bear the responsibility to ensure that your vote does not cavalierly throw away the futures, careers, and lives of the people in our district. Science now shows one of the easiest, most effective ways is to wear a mask to stop asymptomatic spread. Failure to enact a simple and life-saving mask requirement would serve as a direct and negligent refusal to uphold the core beliefs our district claims to stand for. Do not compound this problem. Be the solution. Do better.
Thank you, Miranda. Next, we have Christine. I shouldn't have known better. I'll wait next time.
This is why we ask, we respect everyone's response, but to move this through quickly, otherwise it's taking away time from people to talk to us.
Christine Watkins, please. State your name and address.
Christine Watkins, 309 West 19th Street, 57106, or 5, excuse me. I graduated from the Sioux Falls School District 3 years ago, and I am proud to tell people that. I have nothing but love for the district. I love my teachers, I love my classes, I love my schools. I love the education I receive. But if you love something, you have to hold it accountable. And I am here today to hold you all accountable because I still have 2 younger siblings who are in school, the school district. The proposed plan to return to school is not good enough to protect their health, my family's health, or the community's health. High schools are packed with students, and it is impossible to social distance. When I was a student in the hallways, they were so full, even a 5-minute passing period was not enough to go from one end of the school to the other. The classrooms I learned in were jam-packed. Even the cafeteria I ate in had students trying to figure out spots to make. The school district has grown since I graduated, and my siblings tell me it has gotten way more crowded from what I understand. The plan is to return with basically no modifications to the daily schedule and to literally return to normal. This plans mean that there will be students shoulder to shoulder in the hallway without basic precautions of wearing a mask. During my time learning in the district, I was taught about the subject of science. It was part of the required curriculum, and as a student, we were required to know. To my knowledge, you are still teaching science. In fact, I saw some of my teachers who taught me science outside supporting science. If it is a required subject in the curriculum, why aren't we using it as a guideline principle in the policy decisions? Maybe you missed it, but a study showed in June by Texas A&M that found 66,000 infections were improved by wearing a face mask in over a month in New York City. This same study concludes that wearing a face mask in public corresponds to the most effective way to prevent human transmission. The Mayo Clinic currently advises everyone to wear a cloth mask to help reduce the spread of COVID by people who have it and don't realize it. Cambridge University released a study in June that concludes even homemade masks from cotton t-shirts or discloths can prove 90% effective at preventing transmission. There's probably all the mounting scientific evidence that caused the CDC to recommend everyone to wear a face mask in public. Our schools are public. where the proposal blatantly disregards Texas A&M, it regards the Mayo Health Clinic, and disregards the Cambridge. It imposes the guidelines from CDC, and frankly, the plan denies science. It's important to make sure students are protected in public schools, and especially for students of color. Brookings Institute found that every age category, Black people are dying from COVID at roughly the same rate as white people more than a decade older. I'm here to encourage you to make revision to the current proposal that embraces science, implements policies that enforces social distancing, implements policies that mandate a mask, make policies that uphold your curriculum. This is a matter of economics. We are not willing to sacrifice our teachers, students, and parents for your so-called plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Okay. I think we asked if we could just refrain on the applause because we're taking away time from the speakers and the number of people that will ultimately be able to speak.
Next, we have Samantha Spahn Chapman. Please state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Samantha Spahn Chapman. I'm at 812 South 2nd Avenue, Sioux Falls, 57104. Thanks so much for your time today, School Board, and Superintendent Staben, welcome. Thank you so much also for the presentation on the Return to Learn programming. I can tell there was a lot of thought and effort that went into that, especially with the consideration with our local healthcare system, so I really do appreciate all of that. I'm here as a parent. My daughter is in 2nd grade at Susan B. Anthony. We love our school, we love our teachers, and we love all of Emerson's little friends. My daughter also has a rare genetic disease that impacts her liver and lungs. And that puts her at a greater risk for severe illness if she were to contract COVID-19. Although she would suffer more if she got sick, I think any person getting sick is a big risk and a liability. If we look at the public health impact of returning kids to schools without mandating masks, we know that COVID is transmitted primarily through airborne droplets. Masks prevent that. By simply, if we have, as stated in this plan, enough masks to give every student a mask and every teacher a mask, why not simply mandate them? It will decrease the number of infections and also can prevent unnecessary time off of work for parents, staff, and teachers, reduce outbreaks and subsequent school or classroom closures, and save healthcare resources tasked with testing and clearing students to return following an illness. We avoided a huge surge here in Sioux Falls. I work for Stanford Health and was a part of a lot of these conversations, and it was really alarming when we were looking at those initial surge numbers, and we were lucky that we did avert that crisis. However, I think we should be very cautious in our approach as we bring students back in large quantities together, which you're doing with this plan, but I would just like to add that mandatory masking would do a lot as far as further preventing a large outbreak and surge and weight on our healthcare systems. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Jennifer Brigham-Gabor, and please state your name and address. Oh, I see you're coming in. We won't use this time against you, Jennifer. Just kidding.
Transportation.
Jennifer Bergen-Gabor. I live at 6432 West 56th Street here in Sioux Falls. Is that what I need to tell you?
That doesn't use your time either.
Got it. Okay. So I come to you tonight as a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, an aunt, an educator, and a member of the Sioux Falls community. All of these roles do not stand alone. They all weave together, and I've always been passionate about each and every one of these roles. At the heart of all of it is my love for every human I meet, even the ones that drive me crazy. I have said in my 27 years of teaching that once you're one of my students, you're one of my kids for life. Samantha's one of those. I didn't know she was speaking tonight. I was very proud of that. It is in the spirit of family that I share my concerns and objections to recommended mask wearing, and I urge you to make it mandatory for all staff and students in the district. And I want to show you my why. And my why comes in an 84-year-old mother who I want to see. I don't want to have to go to work and not be able to go see my mom. It's about family. It's about the family that I have created within my staff and all those people too. It's about this amazing little girl who fights every day for her lung health. And she's amazing at wearing a mask, and she's 5 years old. They can all learn. It's not something they can't do. She knows. She knows the virus is here and we got to deal with it. The bottom line is, We need to take care of our families. Every one of these educators. I was getting comments from people about my 20-month-old with reactive airway disorder, my high school kids, all of us have this. We all have parents who are ailing and family members who are ailing. I personally have to deal with things. I don't want any of us going out in a body bag, like Ray said. You don't want any of us going out in a body bag. I have dealt with student loss, from suicide, from accidents, from all of that, and it is horrendous. I don't want this disease to take us out because we aren't doing everything we absolutely can. Friday the 13th is never going to be the same in my mind again. It's been exactly 4 months since we have been with our students. And I know from every one of these people, we miss them. But we don't want to be with them if they're not safe and we're not safe, because that's not right. Then we have that massive quick close the door. And I would appreciate for anybody who is here in support of mandatory masks, if you would please just stand up and be seen. We stand together. And I know from reading Facebook today, the comment I read said, this is tougher than the boundaries. And it is. We get it. And we love you guys for all that you do. I have total respect for every one of you, and you know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next, we have Sophia Shibley. Please come up and state your name and address. And did I say your last name right?
Yes. Thank you. Sophia Shibley, 9420 West Cremaya Circle. Okay. I graduated from Roosevelt High School 3 years ago. I moved to the T District my junior year, but decided to open enroll to Roosevelt because of the school's reputation and the opportunities I would have in the Sioux Falls School District. I am currently a student at the University of Sioux Falls. I used to be an education major, and I wanted to teach in a school district like the one I graduated from. A district that cares about the safety and well-being of everyone in the school and is filled with teachers that changed my life and inspired me to follow my dreams. I'm no longer an education major, and with all due respect, I don't know that I would want to be after hearing about this proposed plan, especially not for a school district that doesn't consult with all of the teachers before making its decisions. When someone asks me what I remember about high school, I laugh and I tell them I remember how packed full the hallways were. I tell them I remember my classroom being so full of students that I couldn't remember all their names, and trust me, I am very good with names. When I think of these events now, I no longer laugh. I imagine myself going through that in the middle of a pandemic, and I worry. In this scenario, social distancing is impossible, even with the district's proposed plan. So many people are at risk, and that includes teachers, students, parents, custodial staff, and more. Let me put this into perspective. I used to play volleyball and I absolutely loved it. Then I had a coach that slowly made me start to hate the sport. He didn't ask us as players how we felt about changing how we practiced. He didn't ask us how we felt about changing positions, and instead did it anyway. And he had the ones that wanted more playing time put in extra work, only not to fulfill the promise of giving them more playing time. By the end of the season, 4 girls quit. He made me and others lose passion for something we love to do. When you make changes without consulting the players, you will lose valuable members to your team. I have spoken to many education majors that have gotten jobs in this district and others. They have said that they do not feel safe with this virus without making masks required. These are teachers fresh out of college that were ecstatic about having their own classrooms this fall. Members of the board, we're holding you accountable for the safety of these teachers, some in which are parents and grandparents. Also, I would just like to point out, I gave this whole speech in a mask and I can breathe and speak just fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sophia. And last but not least, Tim Eckhart, please. Sorry, I didn't say it very loud and you got clapped over. Tim Eckhart, thank you. And if you'd say your name and address too, please.
Thank you. My name is Tim Eckhart. My address is 2312 South Holt Avenue, Sioux Falls, South Dakota 57103. I'm here on behalf of the Sioux Falls Education Association, and I'd like to thank you, President Mickelson and the board, for allowing me to speak today, and welcome, Dr. Staven. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I wanted to begin by thanking everyone who has put work into the Returning to Learn plan. This plan represents a whole lot of hard work by our administration for an unprecedented back-to-school season. As the president of the Sioux Falls Education Association, I've been fielding a lot of concerns both prior to and after the initial release of this plan. Our educators are very worried about keeping their students, their families, and their colleagues safe from COVID-19. I wanted to begin by saying that there's some solid building blocks in the district's plan, but there are a lot of components that still need to be answered and developed. And it's difficult to feel that our community, our school community, will be safe when this plan, I can't read, old eyes. When this plan mostly represents board approaches to this problem and not specific procedures. We need specifics. We needed specifics on how social distancing works in our schools. Our middle school and high school hallways are bursting full with students during every passing period. And in those 5-minute periods, students traditionally pass within inches of hundreds of other peers. What specifically are we going to do to reduce that exposure? How do we realistically keep ourselves 6 feet from each other in a classroom? We need specifics on how we're going to properly sanitize our classrooms, which we've gotten a lot more of, and we appreciate that. We need specifics on how we plan to ensure that the highest degree possible that sick students or adults are not exposing other students and staff to COVID-19 on our buses or in our buildings. Will we verify that parents and students have looked through that daily checklist? How will we hold them accountable for the daily checklist before we enter the building? Will there be temperature checks? It is important to remember that we do not exist in a vacuum and that other school districts in our state, region, and around the country are dealing with the same obstacles. I want to encourage you, the board, to look at other large schools that are geographically close to us, like Omaha Public Schools. Omaha will require that all students and staff be required to wear face masks. If an educational community 3 hours away can require mandatory masks, so can we. And I highly encourage this board to consider making masks usage mandatory. So many of the specifics above become part of our secondary and tertiary efforts rather than our primary line of defense when mask usage is mandatory. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tim. That was our last speaker. So Dr. Knowles, if you want to come back up here, or we can start asking questions. Now what happens typically is the board will start asking administration our questions and have a conversation about the return to learning plan. Open it up.
Seems weird to go back to like the virtual learning academy, but that's a question I have. I'm assuming that we wouldn't allow enrollment in and out of that. I mean, once a parent made the decision to enroll their child in the virtual academy, that they would have to stay in it through the end of the semester? I mean, maybe those are conversations that are still ongoing at this point, but.
Some of that is still ongoing as we're working through to determine some of the providers and things of that nature. But the intent on that is at the semester. Our goal would be for the year. And many of which that have contacted me and talked to me about that, our goal would be that they're committed to that through the year. Now, we understand there could be some circumstances that may change in someone's life. It could be some individual that is currently not working, begins to work, and that may change their family dynamics. So it is not intended that they can just jump in and out of that, and we're going to try to clearly explain that in the documentation that goes. But it's also a part that we realize that if it is 6%, I don't know what that percent will be, but when we do the sign up, it's a necessity for our district. I would not be able to incur a 6% cut. So we're going to try to really help them to understand fully what it is prior to the sign up, and then have that at a semester basis at a minimum, and hopefully for that whole year. And many of which have stated they understand that, but hopefully the documentation will help it to even clarify that.
And further clarification just on that too, if it is the virtual academy is happening.
The virtual academy is a piece that we will have for this fall.
It is for sure,
is
because
happening.
I've had people told me that they've heard that it is maybe going to happen. So I just wanted to clarify.
It's a part that we're working on currently, getting that in place. And so if someone asked right now what's the entire plan, that'll come out a little bit later this month. We're going through and having those meetings, and we need to have that in place. And so we'll have that in place for this fall for those families that becomes a necessity for, if they determine that it's a necessity for. But the goal in that is the semester part. Hopefully our intent is the year.
And I'm making assumptions again, but we wouldn't have some of our specialized programs. I'm thinking Spanish immersion, especially, that would not be available.
You're correct.
Via this.
Yep. And really that's going to hit in the elementary, you're going to look at really those core academics, and there could be some supplements to that. At the middle school, there could be through the providers that we have, whether that be Apex, Edmentum, probably more so with the Edmentum. There are some selectives. Now there's a few things that they could have an option to come to the school for, because there's some things such as a band or choir that they just would not be able to utilize in an online format and be able to participate in. And I know that's been critical for some parents and of that. So we're trying to think through some of those things to be very cognizant of our staff in setting that up so it's not an in and out, month by month selection process. It's easier to go into the virtual than it is to come back out into the classroom for the counting mechanism. But to be able to have that prepared and set up in advance. But a few of those will be things, especially when you look at the high school, middle school, or in the upper levels of the elementary where they begin with the orchestra and band.
Mm-hmm. And has the State Department of Ed signed off? And
we've sent notification to the Department of Education that we are intending to do that to meet the needs with this COVID-19, and part of that virtual to help to take care of those families that may not be able to have their child come back in. So we've sent that notification.
I'm going to hit it head on. Okay. First of all, thank you for all your work, and to the entire district team for all this work. I know we don't have a lot of guidance from our state or our community on this. You know, face masks are not required in our state or our community. And so, you know, Tim brought up Omaha. I know Lincoln is another one that is requiring, but their communities are in favor. So when we brought the hospital systems in and so forth, what were their recommendations on face masks for adults, students, et cetera, on the return to learning community?
And I'll probably have Molly Satter comment to some extent on that, because she's had the conversation with and potentially other conversations. I can say for each of the individuals that were in there, the plan was well received. And as I stated, the document that you see is not the entire plan. And there's so many components of that that go in to help protect and care for our students as a significant priority, care for our staff as a significant priority as we go through and implement these things. But as far as the medical community even of that, I'll have Molly Satter, who oversees our health services, comment on that.
And I'll just add to that, we're in touch with those larger districts. In fact, I just spoke with some folks that I know from my Nebraska days. Everybody is very fluid right now in their plans. They've put out preliminary things just as we are doing, and then they are looking at it from there. I have emails that I can get within the same 10 minutes from physicians in our community, one saying that masks are not appropriate, one saying that masks should be required. That's one of the difficult things about this, is that even within our medical communities, nationwide even, we don't have unanimous agreement, full consensus. One of the other concerns that we hear is when we say the term required, it implies that we are going to take disciplinary action, that we're going to suspend a student or expel a student, or that we're going to fire a staff member. So there's some connotations that come with some of the terms that districts are using, and we're looking at what does that mean to people when we say specific terms, and we want to be as clear as possible. So that's also why we're seeking additional feedback, why we're going to continue working with our medical community, because we do want to do what's safe. Guidance that just came out today from the American Association of Pediatrics says now 3 to 6 feet apart. Before it was 6 feet. So those are things that we're continuing to digest. And then the comment I think that Tim made is the operationalization of this in our schools is really where we have to go now with this, is what does this look like in those day-to-day routines and procedures? So Molly, I'll turn it over to you for more medical terms.
I don't feel like I have much else to say after that. That was really, Dr. Stavum touched on what I wanted to mention, was that we've had lots of conversations in that meeting where we pulled both Avera and Sanford providers in. I've had personal conversations with a variety of providers, and some are very strongly in support of mask wearing, and others recognize, like the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC recognizes, that there are a variety of students, or excuse me, people that simply cannot wear a mask for a variety of different conditions and reasons. And so you have both sides of that, and that's the really difficult part. Being in healthcare, I recognize how important it is. But then we realize that there are others that are unable to wear a mask, and how do you enforce that, and how does that realistically look in the school building? So
you know, I was thinking like in Lincoln, Nebraska, I had seen that their city actually, you know, kind of like our red, green, I call it like the U.S. Forest Service fire danger symbol, basically the green, yellow, red for the COVID scale for us. The city of Lincoln actually does that, and then the school just aligns with the city. Have we had communications with the city on possibly doing something like that to help to not just give it on our backs to do that, but the city as a whole, this is what the risk in our community is or not risk, so that when we are in different levels within our plan that we know what it's going to be.
So we have utilized and included the city in our discussions. They were in here. They were here with the city health department and risk management was here when we had our conversations with the healthcare providers and are fully aware of that. I don't know of any plans for the city to move forward with any requirements at this time. Certainly, that does make a difference in the ability of schools to follow suit in that. But there hasn't been any discussion that I'm aware of, but they were involved in the conversation.
Thank you. And to the public, I don't know if everybody's aware, so we saw, the board, we just saw this report Thursday as well. So some of those questions you're probably going, weren't you involved? We are just reading this, so that's why we're asking these questions and hopefully answering some of the other public questions as well as we do this today.
We do potentially have it established, and you saw the colors going throughout there, that it could be utilized in that format if that was a city decision or a state decision. We are aware that there are others that have utilized that, so we try to utilize those colors throughout there as well. Whether it'll be done in that fashion or not, I don't know, because to do it independently will help to notify our parents, but it isn't necessarily a state or citywide system.
I think it's great that we'll have something at least that's easy so people know we're in yellow and this is where we're going and so forth, but it'd be great if we could have that.
I think an interpretation of the prevalence of the COVID, that we're using a data-driven approach based on local data as opposed to just looking at headlines, number one, and number two, that we remain flexible. And what we do in August, we can know that that is not necessarily what we will do in September, October, because we need to remain extremely diligent in the data and the research that we're doing. It needs to be timely in order to continue to look after the safety of our students and our administrators and teachers.
As part of your plan, I'm just thinking, I heard a lot about lunches, and when I think about lunch, at least from a high school level, I know there's certain rules around open lunch. Have there been conversations about perhaps opening that up a little bit wider to allow students to leave, therefore leaving more space for those, either it's the younger students or whatever that criteria is?
And I smile a little bit because you're right. I mean, open lunch has been something that some have sought after for years that way at lower grades. And yes, there has been. And part of those discussions with a question and answer portion coming up with our administrators, some of those have been asked, similar to that with the open lunch, especially when you look at juniors or some others, to be able to minimize the numbers. And those are all considerations. They've been tabled and put into a Q&A chart that we'll begin to discuss with building administrators so we can incorporate those things. There's some goods and bads to that, because as one administrator put that in, another had stated, my concern would be as we open up open lunch, more may go to the same locations, and just the mass numbers that way could be part of an issue as well. Sure. And so we've had conversations on that, absolutely. A final decision being made, no. We really wanted to hear from the group and have those discussions before those things are started to share out with others.
I know for a lot of students that's a reward as well. And so to take, people have maybe worked hard and want that, and then to just give it to everybody, I know oftentimes causes some bitterness too. So.
And there's been some good success with that. As we see at Roosevelt, just with the sheer numbers, we've utilized that specifically there, and it's helped to reduce that so they can manage the lunch flow. And so the question came up with the other schools due to this situation.
What about using outdoor space?
That has been discussed as well. There's potential in certain times of the year. Now you have to be careful to rely on that as your alternative, because of the fact that if there's inclement weather at that point in time, then all of a sudden, what is the backup plan? And a couple have come with some backups on that. So that's the lunch portion, the before school, the after school. Those are some discussion points. The logistics and some ideas get brought up in a variety of areas of releasing classes staggered. Well, then another principal brings up, well, if we do that, then there's another group waiting in the hallway while that other group hasn't been released yet. So it always sounds easier sometimes to say, well, just do that and it'll resolve that. But there's another complication that we have to think through as well so we can determine those things. And so we're going to work, a lot of those things are on the agenda for the building principals, that we'll go through and start to work through some of that detail in their specific buildings and what would work and what would not work. Yep.
And maybe this is a Molly question again, but have, I've seen other states and districts use an age break or a grade break for mandatory face masks. So was that ever discussed in the return to learning?
We have, we've looked at those options, yes, of conversation in that. Right now, our concern is still, as Dr. Staben has stated, if there's a refusal, and there has been emails that we need to require everybody to wear a mask. There's been emails that my child will not wear a mask. And the question that comes into that, and would I prefer everybody to wear masks? Yeah. And it's not about my preference. It's going to be about what can we do to help our staff and our students stay healthy. And so we're going to, no question, encourage that to be part of the process. But ultimately, if it's mandated, what do we do with that kindergarten child whose parents said, my kid will not wear a mask? That's not the way they're going to learn how to go to school. And we may agree or disagree with that, but we still have to work with that final outcome of what do we do then as far as a disciplinary measure when it's mandated and somebody refuses to follow the mandate. And so there's been discussions on that. If it was that simple in part, it would probably be easy to say it's mandated, but we've got to work through some of those situations. I think it'll help us immensely to be able to complete the survey, to get some feedback in some of those areas, to see maybe what we can and cannot do to help mitigate some of that. But we want to be aware that there are individuals with such a wide range of views on this very topic.
I think the survey, it will be very important that we state multiple questions as to, as A, would they wear a mask? B, will they refuse to wear a mask? Many options on there, so it's very clear that what they're answering and what we know we're dealing with. And we need, obviously, with staff to make sure that they are included in all of these surveys as well.
And as I stated, those would be, with the shields and the masks, those are being provided for our staff. If they don't, I don't believe many will probably have a shield, so that's going to be provided. The mask, most will prefer to have their own, which I think is great. Mine matches my suit, so I prefer that. But, many will prefer to have their own, but if not, we have that will be provided. And I know some individuals are donating them to some schools, or some principals are utilizing, different things with their schools. So we will have them there. It's the difference in that part of it and trying to get some feedback to make the best decision we can.
And
I'm guessing in the next week, month, year, we're going to learn more and more. That's going to be different than what we know today. Mm-hmm. And my concern with being mandated was what you just said. What do you do with the person that's going to say, no, there's no way I'm going to wear a mask? I don't know how we get through that. A week ago, I would have said, for sure, I want this mandated, and it needs to be done for the safety of everybody. But then I just don't get how we're going to be able to. Because mandated means you do it or there's going to be some ramifications. And what are those ramifications? Where do we draw the line, and what do we do with the violators?
I'm not sure that it needs to be so black and white, and that's why I hope we'll have continued conversation about this over the next few weeks, and certainly through the data we get back from surveys. But I hope we can find a solution on how you discipline someone for not wearing a mask. I don't think that's what we're after here at all. I think what we're looking for is trying to protect our students and our staff as much as possible. I can appreciate that this is a very fluid time. We're learning something new every single day, and I know that discussions are still going on, and I completely appreciate that. But I don't want us to get bogged down with how do you discipline someone for not doing this. I think we need to think outside the box, and I think we need to come up with some solutions. And maybe in a month we won't feel the need to wear masks. I think a lot of us today feel like we need to. But I can appreciate that our information is changing constantly, but I just hope we continue to have this conversation and strongly encourage everyone to wear masks at this time. Certainly would be my preference, but I'm open to just continuing the conversation.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize the flexibility. For me, I'm able to socially distance at this point from all of you, so I don't necessarily have to have a mask. And when I get up and move around, a mask is of importance to reduce the passage of COVID. That said, we need to remain flexible in thinking about the various jobs that people have within the district and their abilities to socially distance. The learning environments of the particular classroom. There may be a teacher that has a child with cochlear implants that has to lip read, so allow them the flexibility to use a shield or the devices they need to create the best learning experience for that child and still keep the safety of the overall population in mind. We know that the CDC, as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics, is constantly changing and evolving, given the research and the data that they have. In the city of Sioux Falls, we have to use our timely data and what the risk is to our kids to pass this on to each other and how it grows within the community. So interpreting that data. So there's no perfect solution, but at some point that we can come together to achieve something that works for us here in a timely manner. So flexibility and trust is of the utmost importance. I think your report does that. Thank you for the work that you've done, as well as other administrators, pediatricians, psychologists, epidemiologists, and public health officials that were involved and consulted with that report. And there is flexibility in that, and thank you.
I think I would just add that this kind of echoes a little bit from the boundary conversation, that we can do hard things, you know, and our kids can do hard things, and we need to give them credit for being able to have the compassion and have the understanding that they are part of a community. And so I just really hope that people can realize that this is in no way a political statement. This is in no way a political decision. As a nurse, I can tell you this is a public health decision, and that's what we're here for. We're here to talk about our staff. We're here to talk about our students, the families that those people go back to when the day is done. And so I think that people need to realize that the longer we can practice social distancing, which in my opinion includes face masks, it includes as far apart, whether it's 3 feet, 6 feet, it includes frequent hand washing, sanitizing, the things that you all mentioned. The longer we can do that, guess what, as parents, the longer we can keep our kids in the building. And 90 whatever % want their kids in the building. And so the more that we can all understand that we're not doing something that we don't want to do, or that we're doing something, we really are doing something to help our neighbor and our grandma and your grandma and my grandpa and whoever else. We're all doing that to help ourselves and our community. The longer we can keep our schools going, we can keep our staff healthy, we can have our kids participating in activities that they want to do and actually give them the full school experience versus a shell of what I feel like sometimes that's what we might end up with. We're going to get the academics, but school is so much more than academics. It's the social, it's the sports, it's the band, it's the whatever. And so the longer that we can all work together, and whether it's a compromise or whether you feel like you're going to, you know, I'm going to take one for the team and I'm going to send my kid to school with a mask, please do that. Because if we can get 60%, 70% of our students wearing masks, that's way better than nothing, or way better than 10%. And there are going to be those students, and we understand that. Again, as a medical person, I understand a mask doesn't work for everybody. And if you're a situation that a mask doesn't work for you, you likely have a physician that's seeing you and treating you for a said condition that would willingly say, you don't have to wear a mask. I will write you a note. I will, whatever it takes. You don't need to wear a mask because it's not good for your health. And I think that that's okay. We understand that. We're not going to say, you know, you have asthma or you have whatever it might be, but there are plenty of those kids who wear those on a routine basis, kids with cystic fibrosis. They go out in public on a non-COVID year, not in 2020, and where things aren't as dangerous, and they still wear a mask. And so I think that it's important for us to remember that we're all on the same team. We all want our kids in school, and we all want our kids to get the best education. And our teachers are going to work hard to make that happen. Our administrators are going to. Us as a board are going to work hard to make sure that that happens. I know that the 12 pages that we saw today is a fraction of what is in that report. And I know that you've asked a lot of the questions that we have. We don't have time. We've already been here for almost 2 hours. We don't have time for you to give us every detail of that. And that's okay. So I think that's where that level of trust comes in. But communication is a big piece of that. And we're just starting that. We're just starting to roll out those pieces of information to staff and to principals and things. And so as we continue to do that, I would just say, please continue to ask questions. Ask your administrators, ask Tim. Dr. Stavum is great about answering. Ask Jamie. All of these people in the room are here for you to ask those questions to, and chances are they've already been asked, and they might be somewhere in this document that we just haven't rolled out to the masses yet because it's still in process. And so I just want people to remember that we can do hard things. All of us can together. We can support each other. Our kids can do it, and we will come out on the other side of this a more united community, hopefully with more compassion for each other and greater understanding. But that's going to take all of us working together and having patience and having trust in order for that to happen.
Thank you, Carly.
Sorry.
Ditto, no. My questions would be, when will us, the staff, public, when will we get, I know we're getting another report in 2 weeks, but for example, will that living large document, when will that be available for view? When can we, because I think a lot of maybe those questions that were even asked tonight that we didn't get answered might get answered within that. And also, when can staff feel like they are going to be participating? When will that survey go out to them as well?
The survey we're hoping to be able to have ready to go out this week or later this week, if not the early part of next week, but I would anticipate the survey piece of that to be able to go this week. The overall document, and there's still several changes will happen, or some pieces that may just not go into that, and it's going to be the protocols we utilize at the building. The intention of that was later this month. As we're going through, we wanted to make sure that we follow the appropriate protocols on that. We did that with administrative leadership and vet with the school board, and the next process of that, obviously, Dr. Stavum has sent it out to the staff then. The board report and that information that's in there was sent out to the staff, and we will continue to get that information out there, but we do believe some of those things just have to be vetted first to have other eyes on it, like our medical providers, and that's one group. So the intention of that is we step through each one of those processes that we can release that information as we continue to go throughout this month.
And I would just add, we have a series of things. I don't know if you recall that Dr. Nold said, we have a series of opportunities for principals who are still digesting this to ask those initial questions to help us provide that better clarification for them to then share that with their staff, many who are still on break. And so we're trying to balance that, not on duty, but need to know sooner than later, because then they have to digest that at a building level and be able to think through, what does this look like room by room, hallway by hallway, bathroom by bathroom. And I don't think we can underestimate the level of complexity that it involves in trying to be as clear as we can as we then hand it to our building staff to then operationalize. This is really, really intricate work, probably unlike anything we've asked people to do. And so we've been focusing on clarity and having that teased out as much as possible, so then they're able to really go about the planning at the school level for kids on site. And I appreciate the comment that you made, Carly. Just our collective goal, even now leading up to the start of school, has to be to do everything we can to keep kids in school. That needs to be our goal, and all of those protocols are important to that. As I was out in the community and a new member of the community, you can tell that things are normalizing socially, and that we really need people to be diligent as we approach school so that we don't have conditions that might even prevent us from starting school. So I just want to put that in as a reminder and a collective ask of everyone that we all focus on those good habits that help us keep those numbers trending in a direction that allows us to start school.
Any other further comments from the board or questions? Seeing none, so the process tonight, since this is all new to all of us as board members as well, because we have not had to deal with this issue before, is we are just acknowledging this update. We're not approving, not disapproving. This is still a living document. So still be engaged, still be reaching out to us with concerns, questions, and so forth. But we're going to be getting more information to you. We're going to be maybe making changes and so forth. So be patient with the district and as they go through this process. We have really heard you, and we really appreciate you all taking the time to come, and we do want to protect you. So thank you very much. And do I have a motion to acknowledge the board update on the return to learning?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of acknowledging the board update on the return to learning district planning process signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. We acknowledge the report. On to the school improvement plan. Thank you for coming.
So I'm going to ask Dr. Zeke to come up now with another important part of our school planning for the following year. I think he's still here.
Yeah,
Zeke, are
she
you
get
here?
tired.
There he is.
You can really clear a room.
Waiting for some.
Don't take it personally, Dr. Zeke.
He's very offended.
One of the
Thank
things,
you for accommodating the switch in the schedule too.
Not a problem.
one of the things that I would just
everyone
lead
leaves.
with, oh, sorry.
I just said your first report and everyone leaves.
Yeah. One of the things to be mindful of is the data that we would typically be looking at to monitor school improvement plans, of course, had significant changes last year due to the closure, and I know Dr. Zeke will talk about that, but in many ways it makes school improvement plans almost like baseline plans in some regard for next year. So with that, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Kirk Zeke, Director of Federal Programs, and I am following the wonderful Ann Smith, who has recently retired. I'm here to report on the school improvement plans, and board members were previously provided the plans for your own review. School improvement plans are a requirement for school accreditation through the South Dakota Department of Education, as well as for accountability for Title I of the federal Every Student Succeeds Act. The state requires that the plan be developed with the input of parents, community, and staff. The state further requires that the plan be based upon the analysis of student performance and include a set of assessments to measure the degree of growth in student performance, a set of interventions selected to cause student growth to occur, and a professional development plan to ensure that all faculty are equipped to implement the plan. The template for the school improvement plans has been revised to streamline the process of compiling data and presenting pertinent information clearly and concisely. The template incorporates requirements established by the South Dakota Department of Education for Title I school-wide plans, as well as success action plans for schools that have been identified for targeted support and improvement, otherwise known as TSI, eliminating the need for schools to maintain multiple plans. The plans represent a snapshot of the ongoing improvement plans improvement process guided by a building leadership team, which consists of administrator and 3 or more teachers. These building leadership teams, along with other grade level and content alike teams, meet on a continual basis throughout the school year to examine data and to adjust strategies and interventions. And like Dr. Stavum had said, the data is a little misguided this last year because we were in remote learning. In summary, the Sioux Falls School District remains committed to continuous school improvement, and each school maintains a school improvement plan using an online template. The school improvement plans are focused on the district's mission, the priority statements from the strategic plan, and the targets set under the South Dakota Department of Education's accountability model. I welcome any questions at this time.
Well, thank you for coming for your first report. These are very important plans for all of our buildings in our districts, and I'm excited to see maybe some changes might be made under new leadership and see new ideas and how we'll maybe address these, especially now with what the students and staff are facing due to COVID, and maybe we can reevaluate how we do that. Thank you.
That's good. The recommendation is to approve the individual school improvement plans.
Do I have a motion to approve the individual school improvement plans?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr.
Thanks.
Todd, are you going to come up for the public hearing?
Should I hold this up?
Yeah, exactly. We have, Carly got her cards out for you.
Yeah. Do you need my help? Always wants
We
to
use
talk
those
so
for
much.
STI too.
Exactly. Yeah, that's who needs it, not Todd.
Okay, thank you. As you know, this is our third public meeting on the school budget. We actually began our process back in November 2019, which time the board adopted guidelines and a timeline for the budget process. Between December and February, 19 subcommittees comprised of administration, professional and classified staff, and community members developed program budgets, which were then to be presented to the Budget Review Committee. Because while the Budget Review Committee, of course, has 2 board members on it, President Mickelson and Member Tolke. Due to the COVID-19 outbreak in March, the committee reviewed and commented on the budget virtually. We didn't have an in-person meeting like we usually do. The planned board work session was held March 25th to make an initial review of the budget. We had planned to have a follow-up meeting a week later, but due to COVID-19's impact on the state budget, the second work session was postponed in anticipation of the legislature meeting in June and making significant adjustments to its budget, including state aid. When the governor announced that there would not be a special legislative session in June to adjust the state budget, but there could be one in September, due to legal timing requirements of school districts' budgets, the board held the second work session in June 3rd to just review changes, and there were several of those that we made to adjust for that possibility. And so we now have to have our public hearing by now. So that's what we're doing. This is our official public hearing. We usually would have held it at the first regular board meeting in April, and then you would have tentatively approved the budget, but obviously our schedule changed. So what we're looking at here is in the general fund, which is by far our largest fund, and the most time we spend on the budget is the general fund. You can see the changes over last year. We've budgeted $4.7 million in increase in revenue and $4.1 million in increase in expenses. That's in the expenses, that's just a little over a 2% increase in expenses. Looking at our total budget for the school district, the first 4 listed funds there, Fund 10 General, 21 Capital, 22 Special, and 31 Bond Redemption. Those are funds we actually get levy property taxes for, so we call those our tax-supported funds. All the rest of those are self-supported. They might bill other funds, derive their money from other funds, but we do not have taxes for those. But when you add up all of our budgets, including our insurance trust fund and whatnot, it's almost $400 million of budgeted for next year. When you throw the transfers in there, it's just slightly over $400 million. We also have to request that what our levies will be to the county auditor. Our general fund levies are set by the state. Those are maximums that we're allowed to charge, and then we have an opt-out of $9.1 million above those maximums. Capital outlay is a dollar amount. We're below our number. We're shooting for the capital outlay and the bond redemption fund to be $3 between the two of them. That was our promise made when we passed the bond fund. And our special ed levy is what we're allowed to levy in the special ed fund, where we also get state aid for that. The property tax levy on a home is scheduled to decrease by 5 cents next year. And as you know, we've tracked a house since 2000 and looked at what the school levy has done on that house and the amount of taxes being paid. So since 2000, the average annual increase in school property taxes on that representative residence, which is assessed now at $194,900, is 1.7%. Very reasonable. The total cumulative increase of the house was 98%. The total cumulative increase of the taxes was 41%. So the levy, the mill levy, has dropped quite a bit over that time. We will also, obviously, we have not budgeted the COVID items yet. We are going to, we got about $4.7 million in ESSER grants we have to share with the private schools. So we're gonna get about 4.3 or 4.4 million in our budget. There's the governor, they call it the GEAR fund. Governor gives out money for education. There's $5.7 million available there, but that is not formula. That is competitive, so we'll have to request that. We got about $250,000 in some human resources funds that's already been approved, so that's there. If we've got our per student share of the governor's funds, that would be about $1 million. Now, there is no guarantee of that as well. And then there's possibly other funds available, FEMA possibly, and if the governor uses any of the $1.25 million to help schools with their COVID expenses, that might be available too. We will bring that budget back to you when it's much more solidified, both on the expenditure side and on the revenue side. So for now, we are to have a public hearing, and that's what we're going through right now. So our administrative recommendation to the school board would be to acknowledge the public hearing, adopt the FY21 school district budget, and certify the levies to the county auditors. We can change those up through the end of September, but we always try to set them tonight based on what we know now. I'd stand by for questions after the public hearing.
Thank you. It's now open for public hearing. Anyone wishing to address the budget? Seeing none, we'll close now the public hearing. We'll now open up for questions. Todd, so I saw in Jamie's report it was 7.8 million is approximately the costs associated with is that?
Well, that was the total of the requests. It was about 100 line items of requests, and we've kind of ranked those. So we'll try to match those to the dollar amounts that are available. But that was the request as of last week. It was about 7.8 million. Yep.
I know that's outside this budget, but that was just a question I thought of when we were doing that. And then when we do the additional opt-out, so it's right now it's 9.1 for the public. What's that new number going to be? If we
right. So that's another vote after hopefully this budget is approved. What we're doing there is we are replacing a $7.5 million opt-out that's expiring in 2022, and that the Finance Action Network met last year and suggested a laddering approach with the opt-outs where you start with smaller amounts and you do them every year for multiple years, so that if there ever comes a time when the opt-out isn't approved, you're not finding yourself with a $7.5 million hole in your budget. It might be a $1.6 million hole, which you don't like either, but the smaller amount is better. So there's some certainty in budgeting where you don't have that looking out on the horizon. We have that year where we could have this very large hole in our budget. So we are just opting out to replace the $7.5 million. We're not going to, the opt-out is planned to be for $9.135, I think, million either way. It's not going to increase the taxes. It's just setting up to replace that $7.5 million when it goes away in 2022.
I just thought it would be good to clarify that for the public at that point too. Any other questions for Todd? Seeing none, do I have a motion to acknowledge the public hearing adopting the FY21 budget of the Sioux Falls School District and certifying the levies to the Minnehaha and Lincoln County auditors?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The budget is approved. Last report time.
Okay, this one kind of just touched on it a little bit. Last year, in April, the Finance Action Network met. I know that's probably a term that a lot of people are saying, what's a finance network? We've been utilizing it for 15 at least years. It's had different members on it. Some of them have been founding members. It's a few district staff. There were 3 of us, Dr. Maher, Doug Morrison, and myself. Doug Morrison was actually a fan member way back when on the very first fan. Then we worked with the chamber to pick 5 business folks who were financially sound, financially, they're CFO types and things like that in the community to go look through our budget and make sure that our budgeting practices are sound and we're not wasting money, and then provide us with some advice. So the Finance Action Network, when they met a year ago, they came up with several comments on it. They said the opt-out is a critical component to the budget. It enables the school district to both deliver its current level of programming, but also provides some risk mitigation because we're not utilizing all of the opt-out. So if we get hit, there is some funds available if we get hit with a cut or something like that. The district fund balance was at its lowest point in 25 years last year, and not replacing the expiring $7.5 million opt-out would be catastrophic to our budget. They felt the school district has been fiscally conservative and only uses the portion of the opt-out critical to the district needs, and a 10-year amount of about $15 million in 2019 dollars in opt-out capacity is reasonable in order to maintain the opt-out used at a constant 5.2% of the budget, and also maintain a 2% contingency for the district. Then they said the laddering approach, they said that. So last year we went 1.5 million, this year 1.6, and of course on $9 million, that 1 million, that $100,000 increase is just a little over 1%. So it isn't even quite keeping up with inflation on our total opt-out. There is that. So based on the input from the Finance Action Network group next year, this is just kind of following up year 2 of the plan, is we would ask the board to opt out for $1.6 million for 10 years. That's 2021 through 2030. And there's a resolution in your documents that we probably should read word for word, because we have to advertise, we have to put this resolution in the paper, advertise twice, and then it's subject to referral if 5% of the district voters ask for it to be referred. Sure, that'd be great.
Resolution, the governing board of the Sioux Falls School District 49-5 does state that the above said board is unable to operate under the tax limitation measure currently in statute. We therefore opt out of such tax limitation in the amount of $1.6 million, starting with calendar year 2020 taxes payable in calendar year 2021. This opt-out will be for 10 years, which will be through taxes payable in calendar year 2030. This action has been taken by the board and approved by at least a 2/3 vote of the board. This decision may be referred to a vote of the people upon a petition signed by at least 5% of the registered voters in the district and filed with the governing body within 20 days of the first publication of this decision. Unless this action is referred to a vote of the people and reversed by such vote, this resolution authorizes the county auditors to spread an excess levy to raise tax dollars in the above stated amount. Signed, all of us board members. Do I have a motion to adopt such resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. I'll let Bev figure out who did that. All those in favor of adopting said resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That opt-out resolution passes.
Thank you.
Any other news for the board?
Yeah, I should have said this earlier, but just with all the reports and certainly with the budget process and the return to learn, certainly, I just want to tell the administration how much I appreciate all the work that you have done. This has not been a normal summer by any means, not that you just take a summer break, but it is a tremendous amount of work, and I just know that so much thought and work has gone into it, so I just want to let you know how much I appreciate all of you.
That's good. Yeah. I agree. Thank you so much. And like everyone has said, our ultimate goal is to get people back in these buildings, and we need to do it the best way we can. So seeing no other, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Here's my gavel. It's behind the thing.